All right, so I'm going to get started. It is 1:03. We have a bunch of people on already. Jessica Cheetah Eats, probably know me as, and I'm really excited to teach this class. I hope you guys are all in the Bubble Up group folder, where you're going to see a bunch of different folders. And the first one is video tutorials. So you can take a look at that later. Different apps that I use. Here's my presentation. And a lot of you had already submitted your edits here, so thank you for that. I will be taking a look at them, and then obviously whatever you learn throughout the class, you can go back and edit and then resubmit, and then also an invite for others to join, because this will be recorded, and so you can reference it again and then also share it with other people. So here's my presentation, and what I love actually about Bubble Up is that I created all these different notes and then created what is called a roll. And when I open this up, you'll actually get a chance to see that you can look at it in different views. And I'm going to be presenting it in the carousel view. So once again, I'm Jessica Cheetah Eats. I'm a Samsung mobile ambassador, so I use my phone a lot, and so that's why I'm really excited to talk about how we can use our phones to take amazing photos and videos. And I'm also a Sony Alpha Collective member, so I have a lot of pro knowledge and what it means to take great photos, and a lot of this translates to the phone as well because of the high quality phones we have today. On my Instagram account, if you follow me there, you know that I post a lot of videos, about 15 videos a week, and it's a really big passion of mine, so we'll be talking a lot about video content as well. And I've been featured on the NASDAQ, Times Square, Cosmopolitan, Food and Wine, Entrepreneur, and so I'm really excited to teach you guys today a lot of the knowledge that I've picked up over the last few years. Okay, so this might seem a little obvious, but why use your phone? Well, as you all know, we always have our phone on us. I'm sure you do too. So obviously, in a pinch, if you are, in a destination, let's say traveling, which we hopefully will one day, when this is all over, we can, grab our phone if we see a really good opportunity to take a video or a photo. It's small, light, and compact. As someone who has a camera, knowing that I can carry this and take a great shot is key. It also takes high quality, and that's really important here, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Every phone that comes out is just exceeding the last one, and the quality is key. And we also have all these different modes that are offered on the phone cameras now. So we'll talk about how to utilize those. It's on your phone, so it's easy to upload to social media platforms. You can easily share with friends. You can edit it on the go, and it's probably more time efficient than learning, a professional camera. So these are some of the things that I've learned the hard way over the last few years. So I always want to reinforce that getting in the habit of these small things really do make a big difference. For example, cleaning your screen and the camera lenses on your phone is key. Actually, I took a video on my phone recently and I forgot to do that, and it was a little fuzzy, and it's like you can't really edit as much when you have that fuzziness to it because there's not much you can do. So getting in the habit, that's the first thing you should do. And then next is checking your settings. Okay, so we'll be talking about which settings to select for your phone and for your photos and for your videos. So I'll be talking about that later. Planning out your shoot. So this is extremely important, especially if you are home and you're cooking and you want to take a video or a photo of the images of the food that you're making. Thinking about what you want to shoot first, middle, end. It should have somewhat of a storyline here. And planning it out is just going to be really helpful, not only when taking the photo or video, but also when editing it. Deciding what platform you are shooting for. So obviously this is key, because if you are planning to use this video for Instagram and you shoot it horizontal, you're not going to maximize the video because it's going to be cropped. And same thing for YouTube. So obviously YouTube is horizontal, Instagram, TikTok is vertical. So those are the things that you should be considering when you're starting to think about what type of video you're going to take. And then lastly is using a tripod. This is obviously helpful if you are alone, but even if you're not super steady, you're going to have a lot more better footage and videos if you have a tripod, because it really adds stabilization, even though our phones have great stabilization anyway, but it just adds that element. And then also, I'm going to be talking later on about how I have a folder, which actually we'll talk about here, of gear, so you can look at some of the gear that I use to get great videos and photos. I mentioned that one with adjustable legs is good, because then you can kind of change different angles and capture different moments with the same tripod. All right, so we're going to get into the meat of the lesson, which starts to talk about the settings. So one of the most helpful tools that our phone has that allows us to help frame a photo is the grid lines. And that is a feature that your phone has. So you can go into settings and select that. And that's going to allow you to have a better understanding of how to frame your food. And one of the things that you want to consider during this is the ratio. For example, my phone, and I'm sure yours as well, has different settings and different ratios. And you want to look at that and determine which one to use specific to where you plan to use it, similar to what I was saying earlier. So most phones don't have a 4:5, which is what Instagram's ratio is. And so because of that, I will use a 3:4 because it's a better ratio than a 9:16, which means that I'd be cutting off too much on the top and the bottom. However, if I'm planning to record a video for Instagram stories, the 9:16 would be good, or for TikTok. So the next setting I want to talk about for photo is zoom. So there is great zoom qualities on a phone. You could press it really easily and zoom in double, or make ultra wide. The thing is, when you're talking about zoom versus physically moving closer, when it comes to the quality of the photo, I suggest getting closer to your food versus zooming in, because you will notice the difference in the quality. When you zoom in, your phone is doing all the work and it's decreasing the quality, and so it won't be as clear as a picture. So I suggest, if you're looking to get a close-up shot photo-wise, then actually move closer to your image or to your dish. Next, we're going to talk about auto exposure and auto focus. And what I love about our phones is that with a touch of your finger, you can actually select your focus. And so this is key, because if you don't do that, your phone is the one that's deciding what should be in focus. And this is your photo and your style. And so if you have a dish, but then there's a dish in the background, and that's the one that you want in focus, you're going to want to touch your finger to your phone and make sure you're selecting that part of the dish. And that will be an indicator to the phone that that's what is going to be in focus. And so that is really important. And same thing with exposure. I know that the Samsung versus iPhone is just a slight difference, but it's just a move of your finger with a dial, either with the sun or with the arrow on Samsung, and you can increase and decrease the brightness. I actually usually, if I'm in a situation where it's a little bit dark, I will actually decrease my brightness, because otherwise it starts to look a little grainy. And I know that if I darken it, I can actually still edit that photo and not get as much green. Same thing if I need to lighten it up a little bit, which I have, it's just a slight bit. You don't want to move the dial too much. And if you are joining, I'm just going to say there is a question box. If you guys have any questions, you can drop them in there. I'll be looking at them, and then also answering the majority of them at the end. Okay, so the next thing we're going to chat about is our settings for video. If you take a look at my Instagram, you'll notice that I post a lot of videos. I love videos. And the great thing about the phone is that it takes high quality videos, and I absolutely love it. And I often have people message me asking me what I'm using to take these high quality videos, and it is my phone. So when you're thinking about this, one of the most important things to realize is that photos and videos are two separate beasts. And while taking them on your phone have some similarities, there are a lot of differences. And it is really important that we look at that. So choosing your video settings is going to help you set up you for success. Okay, so the reason why I say that is because choosing your settings is going to either result in a high quality video or the opposite, which we don't want. So when we're talking about high quality, what does that mean? Well, if you look at your settings, there's obviously a lot to choose from. So our phone gives us a lot of settings, and you don't want to rely on your phone to select what settings it chooses. So if you have never went to your settings of your video, it might have just chosen one that might be good for storage, in which case it's a smaller size, and we don't want that. So that is an important thing to think about when right before you're about to take a video. So you can open up your settings and look at what options you have. And obviously, everybody's phones are different. They might, if you have an older version, either way, you want to make sure you're choosing the highest resolution that both the front and rear cameras have. I also think one of the things is you can memorize what I'll be talking about and choose the highest resolution option, but also having a better sense of what that means is really important. And I think that's something that when I learned it and have a better understanding of it, then you know how to apply it as well. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about this. It gets a little more technical, but I do think it's really important. And also this is something that you might see on a professional camera as well. So then you'll have the knowledge for that as well. So one of the first things that you're going to see on your settings when you pull them down is FPS. So what does that stand for? Frames per second. And the best way that I've understood it, because a lot of the stuff seems like super technical and how do I understand all of it, is that you know how when you used to have those picture books and every page is a different picture, and when you flip through it, it looks like a little movie. So that's how many frames are happening per second. And typically speaking, your phone will offer a few different frames per second. The first one is 24 frames per second. And this is something that has been used in movies, and it has a more cinematic look. And then you will also have 30 frames per second, which has a more real life look to it. And typically speaking, when I'm shooting a video, if I don't plan to slow it down and it's just of me, sitting and talking and trying a dish, then I could shoot it at 30 frames per second because I don't plan to do much with the footage in terms of slowing it down or speeding it up. It's just me talking and trying a dish. And then lastly, we have 60 frames per second. And this is the one that I actually use the most. And the reason why, there's a few reasons why. One, it has a smooth and you can slow it down. Now, a lot of what I'll be talking about today is relevant to Instagram's platform. And the reason why I say that is because YouTube actually allows you to upload to 60 frames per second, in which case you would not want to slow down. But because Instagram uploads at 30 frames per second, if I'm filming at 60, I can actually slow it down about 50%. And the amount that you slow it down is also important as well. So some of the reasons why I would want to slow down my footage. Well, remember, everything that you're shooting should have some type of a plan. What is that plan? Well, let's say if I'm shooting an ice cream sundae and I'm scooping the ice cream, maybe I don't need that in slow-mo. But as soon as that chocolate drizzle hits the ice cream, I want to get that motion in slow-mo so you really get to see how delicious the chocolate looks and how it smothers the rest of the ice cream. And so I want it to be in slow-mo because I want that moment to last really long. And so if I filmed it at 60 frames per second and I slow it down 50%, I know that it's going to look really smooth and crisp. So that is an example of how I would use that setting. Now, typically speaking, I'm not going to stop and change the setting during it when I film on my phone. I usually just choose the same high quality setting. And that leads me into, let's see, I want to make sure I didn't miss that. Oh, so I talk about how if I filmed at 30 frames per second, what I used to do when I started Instagram and I was filming on my phone, I was filming at 30 frames per second, and maybe at that point in time, my phone didn't take 60 frames per second. And then I would slow the footage down, and I didn't understand why my video looked like it was stuttering, right? So what's happening is you have something that's 30 frames, and if you're slowing it down, Instagram or whatever platform you're uploading it to is trying to fill in those gaps. And that's really why it looks like it's stuttering. So hopefully that helps give you an idea of the technical part of why you're able to slow something down versus not if you're uploading to Instagram, and why I choose 60 frames per second. Like I mentioned here, as you're following along, this is specific to Instagram. If you're uploading to YouTube at 60 frames, you would not be able to slow the 60 frames down. Now, maybe you're thinking right now, if you have the knowledge of frames per second, well, what about 120? Right now on the settings section in my phone, it doesn't offer that, even though I know that there is a separate mode for slow-mo that does. Okay, so if you're using that, your phone is, choosing the 120 or the 240 for you. Now, when we talk about resolution, you probably have heard 4K before, right? And that is a good resolution. It's going to be a crisp image. It's going to be the quality that I always choose, even though Instagram doesn't at this point accept 4K. I'd rather film at a higher resolution because we all know Instagram is going to decrease the quality and it's going to upload it at 1080. Now, personally, if I'm editing a video, sometimes I do it on my computer versus my phone, even though I'll talk about a different app that you can use on your phone, and I'll export it at 1080p. So when you're choosing your settings, you're going to notice my phone, and I'm pretty sure most new phones have the option of 60 frames per second at 4K. And that's what I choose. And I choose those settings because two reasons. 4K means that it's a high quality, and because I'm uploading to Instagram, I'm actually able to zoom in, which is amazing. And that allows me to get so many different shots within the same video, even if it's on a tripod and it hasn't moved, because I'm able to zoom in and all of a sudden it brings your eye somewhere else as if something changed when it didn't. And 60 frames because then I could slow down when the moment feels right, like when the chocolate's hitting the top of the ice cream. So those are the settings that I choose, and that is the highest setting. And actually, my phone has those options on the front camera and the back camera, which is pretty amazing. Typically speaking, I think in the past, the rear camera had higher quality than the front. Usually your selfie is a little bit not as good quality as your other camera. And when you are recording video, this is actually something that's super important. And there's nothing that drives me more crazy is when you miss something, right? You don't want to miss any opportunity for great footage. And if you're shooting in 4K and uploading to Instagram where you're going to have a 4K footage that will have room to zoom in, then don't physically move your phone closer to get a close-up image, because you can zoom in later. And what if something happens in that frame that you missed because you were so close to something else? So that is key when you are filming. Leave yourself some space because you don't want to miss those great moments. And especially for Instagram that crops too, since our phone, we talked about, if you're filming and taking a video, it's going to crop it on the top and the bottom. If you're too close to the food and it's going to crop, you're going to miss something. So once again, give yourself room, because if you're shooting in 4K, you can always crop and zoom in later. So once again, I'm just going to sum up this page because I think it's super important. I shoot in 4K 60 because for Instagram, that allows me to zoom in because it's 4K and slow it down because I'm shooting at 60 frames per second. If you are watching this now and you look at your phone settings and you do not have those options, feel free to message me after and tell me what the settings are that are your highest settings, and I could tell you a little bit more information about how you can use that in your videos or photos. So this is a video that I took about 3 years ago, and I decided to show you because I wanted you guys to see what it means to take a video that I clearly recorded and then tried to slow down when I should not have. So as you're watching this, it's a beautiful video and it was a great dessert. But unfortunately, for a number of reasons, you could see that the caramel as it's coming down, I tried to slow it down because I really wanted to capture how beautiful it was stuttering. And then not to mention these terrible transitions, which I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. In general, it's still a beautiful dessert and the video is still great, but it could have been improved with some knowledge on how to edit. Lighting. So this is actually really important, especially when using your phone. Our phones are great and the quality is great, but that is only if we have great lighting. So yes, for me, great lighting means natural lighting for the most part. That's what I prefer. That's how I shoot. But obviously, not every situation is going to lead itself to great natural lighting. So let's say we do have good natural lighting. How do we use that? So when, let's say you're shooting at home, I have found which window lets in the most natural, beautiful light. And because I don't want direct sun, I go for a window that actually has a lot of like natural light coming in without direct sun because the sun's going to be a little too harsh. Now, everything that I'm going to mention from this point is really about style too. So maybe you want the sun and you want those dark shadows, and that's totally up to you. Personally, I like light and airy photos, so I like natural light coming in, and I actually like little to no shadows. And so how do I do that? I use something that's going to diffuse the light if I need to. If there's too much light coming in, you can use a diffuser or a white sheet if you have at home. And then also something to reflect. So I have a reflector, but once again, think about all these things that we can use that we have at home. If you have a white towel or a white sheet, you can put that on the other side of the window, and that's going to reflect the light coming in and actually help you decrease a lot of the shadows that are happening on your dish. One thing I want to talk about is it's really funny when you ask photographers what their setup is, especially a lot of my friends who are now at home shooting, and we're used to going to restaurants. My one friend's shooting on her floor. I'm shooting on like a table on a couch in my living room, so I'm not in the kitchen. It's a little setup, and maybe you don't go to that extreme, but just so you know, those are some of the things that are little tricks. Also, now let's say we are shooting at a dinner in a restaurant. Hopefully one day we're gonna get there, right? And it's super dark, and what do you do? I actually have, and I'm gonna link to it in my gear folder, in the shared folder that we all have together, where you can view all of the things that we're going to be going over. And I love it because it was like $45 and I use it all the time. And it's a little light just like this. And I hold it above my phone and it's amazing. And I've produced so many videos and photos with this light, and it just captures the food so wonderfully. And I like it because you can actually diffuse it. It has different modes where if you want to add warmth, which I prefer to usually edit after versus putting on one of those, but it's an option. So I'll make sure to link to that so you can have it as well. And if you have any that you like, feel free to share with me. But obviously we have to be aware that if you're at a restaurant, just be considerate of others and not try to shine it on other people. But I love that light. Also, one thing to think about is shooting with different lights. So when I'm typically shooting at home, I make sure all the other lights are off because different light bulbs give off different colors and such. So you want to try to avoid that. Okay. I talked about the napkin. Yes. So especially with your phone, great lighting is going to produce really great photos and videos. Otherwise, once you start to lose that light, you're going to notice the quality. You'll probably see a little bit of grain, and that's going to reflect in the quality of the video. So you really want, I rather, if I'm starting to lose the natural light, I'll use the light in place for it. Oh, and also, let's say you're in a situation and you forgot your light or you don't have one yet. What can you do? If you're with a friend, use their light on their phone and just hold it above your phone for a little bit of light. And you can actually even use a napkin. I've done this before. A napkin, a white napkin from the restaurant, and wrap it around your friend's phone, and that'll diffuse the light. And then you could use that light to help shine some light on the food to get a great shot. Little tips and tricks that I've been using throughout the year. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. So this is a dish, by the way, I took from Turkey, and it was a beautiful brunch. And I love the textures and different colors and patterns. It was a beautiful place, and I really wanted to capture that. You can tell this is a little bit different than my typical shot, but this brings us into angles and composition. Like I mentioned, the grid feature on your phone is amazing, and there's the rule of thirds, and I don't really follow the rules. I think, you know, use your eye and see what pops to you and utilize that to help create what is your style. And everybody has a different style. And if you look at this photo, you probably wouldn't think that this is my cheat day eats typical style, but it was a beautiful shot and I wanted to capture it and have something a little bit different. So the grid feature is really helpful in this situation when you're creating some angles and composition. Now, for me, this is also something for style. For Instagram stories and TikTok, I think that when my food takes up the majority of the photo, that's what people love to see for me. And those are the ways that I frame and capture content for my audience and for myself. So think about how you want to fill up that photo, whether you want dead space, and there's nothing wrong with it. In this case, I felt that I wanted the food somewhat in the middle, and I had a little bit of this dead space on the left-hand side, and I actually think it works perfectly. So once again, you have the rules and you can bend them a little and see what makes the most beautiful photo. But on to crop factor. Once again, there's nothing worse, and there are ways around it if you have a photo that you kind of cropped in too much at one point or another. Because if you're going to crop and you're going to lose a little bit of your, forehead as you're eating a bite of pasta, that's not cute. So always leave yourself a little bit more room if you know that if you're going to upload it later to a platform that's going to crop it. For TikTok, it does not crop for 9:16. So that way, if you are filming for something for that, you do want to actually take up the whole screen because you know you can upload it like that. Okay, so one of the most important things when taking photos and videos, I believe, is playing with angles. I think that there are certain foods that play itself more towards angle that's above an aerial angle versus a side angle. For example, immediately when I saw these dishes, I loved the way they looked from above. However, maybe something like a burger, if I shot from above, I'm only going to see a bun. And that doesn't really tell me later on if I'm looking at the photo or tell my friends or my audience what's in that burger, right? So these are the types of things that you want to think about. And you know what? We have our phone. It's super light and easy, and it usually has a lot of storage. So take a bunch of shots in different angles and see what works well. And oftentimes I find that I take a bunch of angles, and the one that I didn't think I was going to like the most, ends up being the best photo. So I always think play around with it, see what works, and especially for videos, playing with angles is key. And I think it adds such a dynamic to the video that really ends up feeling like you're at on level with the food, and then you're on top, and then you're on the side, and it kind of gives this more dynamic feel to see what the ingredients are, how it was made. You really just have a bigger sense of a story there. So I think when you're creating a video, thinking about those angles and also composition, right? Thinking about, is there a dish behind it that's going to add a little bit more depth is going to be key, because it adds more interest to the eye. And so when I'm creating a video or a photo, these are the key things that I'm thinking about. And if you look at any of my videos, probably in the last few years, you're going to notice that it feels like I took multiple videos, and maybe I did. And I think that's also key to realize, and that's a little trick. If you're planning to take a video of a dish, maybe you want to make that dish twice and take a bunch of different angles and videos, and then put it together, and it just adds a little bit more dynamic to the video, and it makes it a little bit more exciting. And it also gives you a second chance to get a different angle of the same movement or moment. I think also some of the things you want to think about is, like I mentioned, the depth. I think, when you're taking photos on your phone, unlike a professional camera, we do have different modes, which I'll be talking about later, but adding a bunch of different things in the background, whether they're close or not, do help add a little bit depth. And you can play around with the different apps to help take photos where it really creates these images, which I think look professional as much as a regular camera, because it really just makes that front item or dish stand out in comparison to what's next to it. I also think that, we typically, like I mentioned before, have these expectations of what we should do for certain dishes and what angles it should be getting. And I think getting those unique angles, like, really getting down low where most people wouldn't think to look, or most people don't look at a dish. If you're sitting down and a dish is served to you, you don't look at it at eye level. And that's why something like a burger getting almost like a down to up angle and it making you feel really large, it just adds a little more excitement to the photo. So go for the unusual angle. Just a reminder, hopefully everyone has the shared folders. If you haven't already done so, you can take a look at those. I'm just going to take a little second. And if you do have any questions, make sure to drop them down into the question section, please. Okay, so yes, you can play with your food. I highly recommend it. And I love this because I think this is one of the most common misconceptions, and I see people do it all the time, and it's totally okay if you've done it, because now you know, is that when a dish is delivered to your table, I would say 95% of the time it is not photo ready. And a lot of people say they have certain sides that are their best side. Well, so do dishes, right? So I want you to stop what you're doing when your dish arrives at your table, and think about, what can you do style-wise to help this dish really stand out to who it really is, right? So let's take a look at the photo above. This was the most amazing fried chicken sandwich with butter on a biscuit from a restaurant in Miami. And it did not arrive like this. We actually asked for extra butter, and we put it on, and then we put the biscuit on top, and we doubled the fried chicken, and the butter started melting, and it was like the best moment to capture as that little drip in this little corner here started to happen. And I have probably 50 photos as it's dripping down and down. And I absolutely loved it. I took a video of it, I took photos of it, and I think it's like the really exciting moment that you want people to like drool on their phones, right? And I captured that because I thought about, well, this chicken next to a biscuit and the butter on the side, it's just not doing it for me. How can I make this photo more exciting, right? And so I thought about taking the elements that are included in the dish. I didn't change anything, and I made it my own. And I think those are the types of things that you want to think about when you are at a restaurant. I'm not telling you to change anything or ask for things that are not on it, right? It's just highlighting the dish so that when a person sees this, they know exactly what was on it, and it's going to make them drool too and want that dish. And also, yeah, so back to the side thing, what's your better side? I mean, too often, and I've, been hungry and I just want to eat, and I'm about to eat, I would take a photo and I don't think about it for a second. And all of a sudden I move the burger to the other side, and there's just cheese melting all over it, and it looks so much more glorious on that side. So move the dish around, see what makes sense. There's the classic example of, you know, a sauce that's underneath a bun, you don't even see it. Then that's something you can ask for extra. And having a little drip of a spicy mayo that's on a fried chicken sandwich drip down the front of the sandwich. That way the viewer sees it and they're like, oh, I know that there's spicy mayo on there, or there's some, you know, sauce on there. And they get a better sense of what that dish is going to taste like and what elements make up that dish and the ingredients that make up that dish. So those are the types of things you want to think about. It's not only just making a better photo, but it's allowing your friends and your family and your audience to be able to have a better sense of when they go to that restaurant, because you know they're going to want to, after seeing this photo, you know what they're going to expect to taste from this dish. Playing with colors and textures. I think that's super important. A lot of my photos are pretty up close and personal, but I want to talk about different personal styles. So if you're taking shots that are more of a table style above, and you know, thinking about the different napkins that are offered, is there flowers on the table, different silverware, getting hands in, you know, adding that life-like moment. For me, this is the way I add a little bit of life as it's dripping. But maybe your version of it is adding someone who's like grabbing the salt shaker or about to take a bite of something or handing a dish over to somebody else. So I think about, you know, what's going to add this element to a photo that feels like you're watching a moment happen. And I think those are the types of content that really stands out. And I already talked about the fake out. So back to that, you know, back to fake out, it's not really faking anything. You're just kind of being able to highlight what makes that dish special. I mean, and everyone has their different things. For me, I tend to post a lot of desserts and stuff. So I love like powdered sugar, drizzle of caramel, cheese pulls. If you follow me, you know. So these are the things that I think just add a little bit more excitement to a photo. So playing with your food is okay. I highly recommend it. And if you guys are at home right now, which I'm sure you all are, this is the time you can, you know, continue to pour that syrup over and over again. I actually, you know, typically shoot at restaurants, and I've made the transition to making a lot of at-home recipes. And I've found it to be so much fun because I can really continually play around with the dish. Nobody's waiting to eat except me. I could keep warming up the caramel and pouring it over the dessert. I have, you know, different things like that. So keep trying, and you know that these are the types of things. Practice does make perfect, because as you saw from the previous video to some of my content now, it's a vast improvement. And you know, I love seeing it, and I can't wait to continue to help others and myself. You know, always learning how to take better shots and better videos. We're gonna get to the editing section. Editing is, wow, so important, I think, for so many reasons, because you can take a beautiful photo, but for some reason it might not pop the way you want it to. And I think editing is really the tool that's going to allow you to make your photo stand out. And it also is something that is style. So for example, I have a lot of bright colors. I like a lot of saturation, but it's also important not to overdo it. And I think that it's easy to overdo something. So the way that I think about it is, I just want to, you know, make the colors in the dish pop a little bit more, but not make it feel unnatural. So this is something that I saw. That's actually banana pudding from Magnolia Bakery, and they were doing these little cupcake cones of it. And so I really loved the fact that I took the sprinkles that are on the top of this specific cone, and I added a little bit more saturation and contrast and clarity. And if you do have access to my folders, which you will, that are available to everyone, I did a little editing tutorial on Lightroom and Snapseed, which are my two go-tos. And I showed you like 2 or 3 minutes in each one how I edit a photo. Of course, once again, you can take a look at those, and those will be helpful if you did submit something and you want to edit later and then resubmit your photo with your edits. Those are something that you're going to want to look at, and that helps you get a better sense of how to edit. One of the most important things that I think is the fact that I don't use the filters that are available usually. You can play around with them, but I find that they're usually too drastic. But the auto buttons tend to help start off your edit. and then you could kind of adjust from there. For example, saturation is really quite of a heavy button versus ambience, which is on, I think, Lightroom, and then the other one, no, on Snapseed, and then on Lightroom, it's something else. I'll reference it in a minute. Which I'll add color, but not too much where it feels fake. So I'll be talking about those, and if I didn't, I'll make sure to get to it in a minute. The brush tool. There's two tools that are on both Lightroom and Snapseed that I love because they are going to brush only the areas that you want. I find if you use some of the features that are available on these apps and just do it to the whole photo, it's too much. Notice that I didn't clarify everything on the photo, only the one that's in front that I wanted to draw your attention to. And so that's something that you can use with the select or with the brush tool. I personally think Lightroom has more opportunity for specific edits because it allows you to change specific colors within the app. And I think that is killer because that's something that you see on a lot of professional grade editing apps. So that is something that I love. And I actually use both in certain photos. So I don't just use one for one photo, one for another. Sometimes I'll throw it into Snapseed, do a few quick edits. I think Snapseed's healing tool is a lot faster and easier than Lightroom. And then I'll throw it into Lightroom to make an additional edit. Note that if you are making these edits as you do, and if you do too much to the photo, it's actually decreasing the quality. So just make note that you're not doing too much to the photo. And that is especially true for crop. If you take a photo and you crop it too much, it's going to crush the resolution. So just be aware of that you're not, taking this photo and cropping a little sprinkle. I would have a kilobyte versus a megabyte, and if you upload it to Instagram, it's going to crush it even more, and it's going to decrease the quality. Anyone have any questions on the editing? If not, once again, there's a folder that's dedicated to that. I will add also more videos there. They were quick tutorials, and you can pause at different points so you make sure that you see which edits that I'm using at different points. Just as a reference, here is a photo I took from Mama's 2 of their pizza, my favorite New York pizza. So editing tips for video. I think one of the things that is super important, as I mentioned earlier, is if you are looking to make a shot list, it's going to make your editing process so much easier. I mean, I have someone who sends me content and I edit for them, and I can't tell you it's so fast because they send different clips of every single, action, let's say. So let's say even if you're making something as simple as a peanut butter and jelly. You have the bread, that's one clip. Then he puts the peanut butter on, and that's another clip. Then you put the jelly on, that's another clip. Putting the bread on top, and let's say you have one more step, I don't know, you're adding banana, and it's chopping up the banana, that's one clip, then putting it on. So being able to have that versus, the whole thing, and then, for the most part, there's time in between, it's a lot of dead time, and it's harder to edit. So chop up your video, and then when you have that list, you put it all together, it'll be easier to edit. I also think back to my video that I showed you earlier with that terrible transition. Jump cuts, I think, look more professional than a lot of the transitions that are available on today's video editing apps. So I'd stick to that versus adding in a cheesy transition for the most part. That's just my style, maybe, but that's what I would say. Like if I see a weird transition, for me, it looks unprofessional. One of the things that I actually recently started doing, and I think it's made such a difference personally on my page and just in general, and it just adds to the video so much, is music. There are a lot of, different sites you could get music that's not copyrighted. I know there's a whole bunch that you can use, and then you have to just credit. So whatever it is, just make sure you're going about it correctly. And then making sure your music's not too low or too loud. These are certain things that you might not think about, but are really important. So you don't want someone to be like flipping through and then all of a sudden it blasts right off the bat. They're just going to swipe up because it's too loud. And then also if you're recording sound on your video and your ad music, do you want both to be on at the same time? Maybe you do, but if you don't, make sure you turn that off or delete the sound that's on the original video. And then I think if you add music to your video, it really adds to the experience. And so you can listen to the whole song and think about when that moment builds up. You know, I typically love like those EDM songs if you listen to a lot of my content with different beats, because I love to kind of have the music, those beats go with the food and the jump cuts and then the build up. And then all of a sudden the best part is when the, you know, chocolate drizzle comes on, and then it's like the best part of the song. Okay, so these are the things that I think about when I'm creating a video with my music. And then also video editing. This is something that I touched upon earlier. If you shot in 4K 60, which I highly recommend if your phone has that opportunity to, you can do different angles and perspectives, because you can slow it down, zoom in. Like I said, mentioned a tripod with different legs that are adjustable. You know, stop during it. And also, if you look at my folder, as I mentioned earlier, there's a tutorial on how I edit my videos, and it's actually the video that I uploaded where I talked about this webinar, and it's the Oreo one. And I love it because I shot everything on my phone. I got different angles. So I walked through, I recorded how I was walking through some of the things that I think about as I was taking that video. And you can obviously see the final product. It's one of my last posts. And so I think that if you shoot at 4K 60 when you're editing, you have so many more options to work with. It's not just what the video is there, because you can zoom in and get that extra, that shot that's different of the same exact clip. And so I think that you have a lot more flexibility and creativeness that, you know, you're able to have, because Instagram only accepts 30 frames per second at 1080p. And whatever program you're going to use. Now, I personally love to use Premiere Pro, which is on the computer, and it's a complex, and I'm still learning it every day, even though I've been using it for years. So there's a lot to learn, and it could feel overwhelming. And if you're not there, then I actually think InShot, and I put that app on my Bubble Up folder, and I love it. And my friend uses it all the time, and she told me about it when and she edits all her videos and posts it on Instagram, and I was like, this is amazing, because you can, you know, crop the photo if you want to. I do it all the time now, actually. For my Instagram videos to TikTok, you'll notice a lot of the videos are the same, except the ratio. I change it from 4:5 to 9:16 because I want to utilize the app for, maximize the app for what it is. So I use InShot. I throw the video in there, I crop it, I adjust the time, I speed up, I slow down. It even has adjustments. So once again, I put a tutorial up for you guys in my Bubble Up folder, so you can reference that as well. And let's see. Yeah, and you can add text too. So if you're making a recipe at home and you want to put the recipe ingredients and step by step, that's something you can do as well. And it also has, when you save it, it tells you how do you want to export it. So I exported at 1080p, which is the highest resolution. So should you use in-phone features? I'm going to actually kind of run through this a little quicker than expected because of the timing wise. I think certain modes are amazing on the phone. For example, I think that the portrait mode is great. Maybe not the best for food, but I think in general it's good. They have a hyperlapse I use all the time. It's typically something I use for my Instagram stories versus an actual video that I'll post. But it's a great way to showcase something that's a long type of recipe, and I want to sum it up in 15 seconds. You could take, 3 or 4 minutes, and then it's a 10-second video of how to make a salad or how to make an ice cream pie. So I think that it depends on where you're using it and where it makes sense. But having it on tripods are really great. It'd be really smooth too. There's the ultra wide lens. I think that's great if you're like trying to get a shot of a table filled with food. That could be a really great way to do it. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the zoom function is not the best unless you're in a pinch and you're trying to zoom into something that you physically can't get close to. Samsung does have a live focus video feature, which is really cool. I could post my video for that. And it's like if you're eating a dish and you want to blur out the background because there's just a lot going on. Let's see. If you're not familiar with a lot of them, I would probably, just test them out when you're not trying to record something that's important to you. And then also something called Pro Mode, which allows you to actually take videos in RAW and have more flexibility when you're editing them. And a lot of our phones today have different f-stops, just one or two different options there. And that just f-stop, if you have a photography background, just talks about that blur feeling, kind of like portrait mode, that feeling you get, but blurring the background and having bokeh. Slow-mo. So I've been messing around with slow-mo on my phone, and they actually have two. It's super slow-mo and then slow-mo. The slow-mo is definitely better than super slow-mo. You can noticeably tell the difference in the two. And typically speaking, because I mentioned that we have 4K 60, I prefer to stay with my 4K 60 than use the slow-mo because I just feel like the quality is not as sharp. But once again, depends on where you're using it and how you're going to use it, that is going to matter. We have time for questions and answers now. So while we're waiting for some questions, I do want to walk through a little bit of what we have in the folder here. Submit your edits. That's something that I provided for you guys to submit your edits, and I'm going to be commenting after this workshop, and obviously take what you learned here, and I want you to think about what you can do to that photo from the things we talked about. And I'm also going to comment and submit your re-edit in a few days whenever you're ready. So I'm really excited to see what you guys have there. Invite others to join. As I mentioned, this is going to be up for a few weeks, so you guys can check it out again. And if you forgot what I said, check out the video, rewatch it. These are all going to be here. Video tutorials, like I mentioned earlier. So here's a video of my Oreo pie that I took. So I went through the settings, and I just kind of go through a little bit of the process of me taking that video and different things that I think about throughout the video. If you notice, as I'm showing different clips of how I took this Oreo video and then look at the video that I posted, it obviously looks really different. I actually cropped in this part. I got close to it. I actually increased the exposure here just slightly. So these are the things I kind of run through, so that way you guys can watch that and get ideas for how you can use that also. I also gave a tutorial in Lightroom and then Snapseed. I talk about different apps that I use, and then the gear will be there also in the next few hours on some of the gear that I like for using my phone and how I can, kind of up the quality and such. So I just want to see if you guys have any questions. Hi, major food addiction. Oh, I'm not actually seeing all these. Hold on now. How do I get this to go out? Someone said I'm from Manchester, UK. Not sure if this where we send message. Yep, you're good. I'm gonna try to see if I can extend this a little.
Hey, Jessica, your camera is frozen. Maybe you want to stop screen sharing and just have your camera on so that you can answer these questions live with your pretty face.
Okay, so how do I stop the screen sharing?
Underneath sharing, which is in the dashboard, there should be an option that says stop showing screen.
Okay, is that good?
All right. It is just your camera now, but you're still frozen. So maybe turn your camera off and turn it back on and see if that rejiggers it for you.
Any better?
Sadly, still frozen. Is it still frozen for everyone else? Oh, nope, you're back. Great. Okay.
Oh, am I back?
Now you're just showing your blank screen again. So try clicking your camera one more time.
Is that
Perfect.
good?
There you are. All right. So do you see all our questions?
The way that let me try to extend it a little.
Yeah, make that box as big as you can. I've been responding to every single one with a period so that everyone can see all the questions, but obviously they'd like to hear from you. So you get to those as you can.
I'm only seeing oh, here they are. From India, so excited. Sorry, I'm just seeing these now. For some reason I was only seeing one at a time and they weren't really coming up. 6 p.m. here. Okay, should we be on our phones or laptop? Either way, wherever you guys watched it, hopefully it came up on both. I'm still not seeing too many others. Oh. Is there a way to, sorry guys, just trying to navigate this, giving me a
How about
little
this?
trouble.
I will read you the question and then you can answer it for the group.
Sure, perfect.
Awesome. So, any recommendations on creating a brand identity?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that should be the first thing you think about. I think we all have someone that we relate to, and I think showing your personality is key, and creating consistency. So throughout your posts, think about, is this, reflecting what I want my brand to be, and is it showcasing a little bit of personality? I think at the end of the day, we all connect to a person versus, maybe a food dish. So, integrate that into who your brand is, and then people are gonna, find comfort and relate to you on a more personal level.
You mentioned earlier in your presentation about decreasing exposure. So why would you decrease the exposure during darkness?
So it's really important that your phone compensates a lot for, the surroundings. And so when it's dark, it's still trying to add that light to help maximize what's in the view. And so I tend to see a lot of the grain, and so I'll decrease it, and it kind of eliminates a little bit of that grain.
What phone do you use?
I have a Samsung Note 10 Plus.
Great. I'm wondering why the FPS affect why it is that my video sometimes gets foggy when I upload them to YouTube or Instagram.
Foggy,
FPS?
So frames per second shouldn't affect the fogginess. I think the only time I noticed there's fogginess on my video is when I did not clean the camera. So I would check that. It should not affect the fogginess. Do you mean maybe the quality? It could affect the quality if you're uploading it at a different setting. So that could be something that you might want to consider.
You mentioned covering your light with a napkin. Do you cover the mini light with the napkin?
Yeah, so if you're in a situation where you're at a restaurant and you're using someone else's phone for your light, then yeah, you want to cover it with a napkin over the light that is being used from someone else's phone. And that could be applied to if you're actually using the light from that I was mentioning earlier that I'm going to have in my gear. If it's too bright, you can move it away a little bit, or you could put a napkin which just adds a little bit more of a filter so it's not so harsh.
Is it better to use your phone when the lighting is dark versus a DSLR?
In general, DSLR will probably perform better because you can actually adjust this. There's more settings to adjust than a phone has.
Do you need to have the best phone? I have a slightly older model, an iPhone 8.
Absolutely not. I think even that model is going to have, great quality. It's just how you use it. So you might want to make sure that you're shooting in the, best light possible. If you're going to be taking photos during that time, then that's going to be the maximal time to shoot. So you know that you're going to get the best, or use a light like I mentioned.
Do you have any tips for organizing plates?
I'm not sure. Do you mean organizing them? I'm not sure if they're going to be able to answer right now, but I'm not sure if they meant organizing the plates with
a plate, like plates on the table. Like, how do you have any organization of plates on the table recommendations?
I think that, just using, utilizing your style. So if you want to have them like in a uniform way, or if you want to have one dish more in front of the others, to kind of make sure that's the thing that you want to focus on most. So I think you could kind of play around and see what works, and do different angles too.
My question is on watermarks. What are your thoughts? Do they distract viewers from your image? Should you hide them in the photo or leave them obvious? I've had issues with stolen photos and I'm trying to figure out a solution.
I think everyone has a different opinion on that. I have friends who do a watermark and they do it at the end of their video. So that could be something that you want to think about rather than it taking up the whole time. I personally, I don't like watermarks, even though people have stolen my content before. I just think it takes away a little bit from the video, but I understand both ways. So it's what you feel most comfortable, but a good trick is to put it at the end, even though I guess technically someone could cut it off.
Which filters, I think you talked briefly about filters, but which filters should you use for food shots on Insta?
I don't use any. So I personally think filters are usually too harsh. I prefer to edit on other apps, and even on other apps. On occasion, there's a filter I'll use on Snapseed, but typically speaking, I think that you're going to be better off editing the photo with your personal style versus a filter.
Do you have any tips for photographing takeout food and how to make it look better when it arrives?
Yeah, I think that one of the best things you could do is probably just transfer it to, some of the plates that you have at home and do a little mix match. Can't say that. And I think taking it out adds a little bit. And even if you want like leave one of the containers as part of the image so that people can have an understanding that it is takeout, but I think it just adds a little more.
I'm having a hard time finding the best way to take a video on my iPhone. So when I upload the video to Instagram, it fits perfectly and not crop out half the video.
So I think that what I mentioned earlier, when you're taking the video, you're probably taking it too close, and I would back up, and that way you have space to edit. And then let's say you feel like now you have too much dead space, I've utilized the app that I mentioned, InShot, and you can crop it just the way you like with a 4x5.
Where do you find music for your videos?
Epidemic Sound. I've been using it for probably a year or so, and I love it. There's so many options there, and you could select different moods, genres, and such. I find that I'll spend hours like looking for good songs.
What free apps do you recommend using for organizing posts and scheduling posts?
I'd actually love everyone else's input on that, because I personally don't use anything. I just schedule everything myself.
All right. Do you have any tips for shooting drinks rather than food?
Yeah, I think drinks, there's so many fun ways to shoot drinks. I think just the action of pouring the drink into a cup, it could be exciting, and getting a slow-mo shot of it, a down to up angle, so you really see like where the drink is coming from, if it's from a mixer, the different cocktails, you can have the different liquors or liqueurs that are involved in it, step behind to add a little bit more depth. What are the ingredients in it? So you can add, if there's a slice of an orange for an Aperol spritz, or cherries. So there are a lot of different ways to play with it.
Great. I missed my spot. When doing photography on a mobile phone, is there any software that can adjust the color impressively?
There are features on my phone. I know that you can adjust the warmth and such, but I would say that even if you don't have that, you can just do that post edit. And I probably prefer it, because sometimes I feel like if you do it during it, it's just going to change the image, and it's easier to edit after, personally.
When I edit videos, it often affects the quality. How can I avoid that?
Well, there's a lot to that. I think I need to know where you're editing it. I think how you're editing it, what resolution and frame rate you took it at. So there's, I think, more information I would need to be able to help answer that question. So feel free to message me directly, or upload that video onto my into that folder, and I'll be able to have a better sense with some of the information how you took that video.
Do you have any recommendations for fun, free template story apps?
Oh yeah, I actually use Unfold. Hold on, I'll look real quick. I think it's Unfold, and I use that all the time. And I think that it's a great app to Unfold to add a little bit more dynamic to your stories. I wouldn't use it for my post.
Not photography related, but someone's curious how you gain followers and engage.
I think actually Engage is probably one of the biggest reasons. I think that I have a constant communication with my audience, and I think I just constantly thinking about how I can build the community of people who are passionate about food and travel like I am. I think also like a lot of the video content that I produce is exciting, and people are interested in seeing what's on my cheat day. So I think it's important to have your niche and stick with it, be consistent, and communicate with your community. So if you're trying to build, what community are you trying to be a part of? Reach out to those people.
Do you ever try to photograph steam to convey the temperature of the food?
Yeah, often. So in that situation, that's something that I would make sure I was shooting. And like I mentioned, I usually do 4K 60. Because if I'm able to slow it down, it really captures it. And if there's something a little bit darker behind it, you're going to be able to visualize it a little bit better versus if there's something white. So obviously the steam has a bit like whiteness to it. So think about if you're going to open up, a pepperoni roll, which I did recently, and it was steaming. If you have a dark surface behind it, you're going to be able to visualize the steam a little bit easier and edit it also with a little bit of taking down the shadows and adding a little bit of the whites there.
Do you have recommendations for great content creativity for TikTok?
Oh, well, I think I love TikTok because you could just do whatever. It's like be yourself and be funny. I think so. Yeah, adding personality. The action videos are great. So, if you have something that's like surprising, like you open a dish and all of a sudden there's something in there that you didn't expect. Like those are the types of content I think like goes viral there. And it's a different platform than Instagram. So I think 15-second videos and adding songs that are trending are key.
How do you make ugly food look better, like tan and beige foods?
I mean, I think tan and beige foods can be pretty. If you look at a lot of my feed, a lot of brown, like pizza and stuff like that. But I think it's about styling it. So, thinking about if your food's really brown, maybe adding a pop of color with, some of your dishware, napkin, flowers. So surrounding the dish with something else that can, add a little bit of pop of color or dynamic to the photo or video.
Is Illustrator okay for editing and creating layers?
I've never used it, so I don't have enough information to answer that.
What are the settings for shooting in RAW on your phone?
So on Samsung, and from what I have researched, I don't know if iPhone has this option, but we have something called Pro Mode, and the Pro Mode allows you to adjust the shutter speed, the ISO, and it really gives you more in the f-stop and gives you more flexibility in controlling the photo and produces a RAW, which is amazing because that's like replicating a professional camera, which is a few $1,000s, So it depends on your phone.
If I take a 4K video at 60 frames per second and upload on Instagram, will it work? Because you mentioned it only takes 30 frames per second.
Yes, Instagram will change the quality based on what you provide. So even like I mentioned, I take 4K 60. Yes, I edit and export it at 1080p. Let's say you were uploading straight to Instagram. Instagram's going to decide how to crush it.
Do you copyright your photos?
No.
Would you suggest taking a slow-mo video or take a 4K video and slow down the speed on InShot?
Can you say that again?
Sure. Would you suggest taking a slow-mo video or take a 4K video and slow down the speed on InShot?
So there's more to that. So 4K is the resolution. So you could be shooting at 4K, but what's your frames per second? So those those are two things that are selected at the same time, where slow-mo is not going to be a 4K. So I'd say if your phone takes 4K 60, I'd probably go with that over slow-mo. Let's say your phone only takes 4K 30 and you need a slow-mo, or you're looking to get a slow-mo, then you'd have to go with the slow-mo option.
Do you find it better to have more than one slide in each post?
100%. I mean, if that's a trick or tip that I would give, I think carousels are key when you're posting on Instagram, because it will often show up twice on someone's feed because it shows the second part of the carousel again. So I think that more people are seeing it.
Do you find that engagement is higher when you are in the photo versus just the food, especially when you're working with a brand? Do you suggest being in the picture versus a picture of the product?
You know, that's also a style question. I think that also is your brand question. I do a little bit of mix of both. Depends on what the brand is and how I want to portray it on my feed. So it's hard to say and answer that because I don't know, you know, what your account represents. For me, I always have like a healthy mix. So certain things, if I'm filming, I think would lend itself better if I'm in the photo. And I personally like to mix my feed up with photos of food and photos of me with food. So it depends on your content. But of course, feel free to DM me and you can show me some of the examples and I can help you through that.
All right, we've got 5 more questions left. What are your thoughts on boomerangs and watermarks?
So boomerangs are great for stories. I love them, but I would never put it in a feed post, but they're fun. And then you said, what was the last one? It was boomerangs and
watermarks.
Yeah, I guess I mentioned watermarks earlier. I personally think it takes away, but if you find that your content's constantly being stolen, then I would swing it at the end. Or if it's on a photo, I mean, it's up to you. For me, I just don't feel comfortable doing it.
How do you keep your video editing the same across the board when editing individual frames?
So actually with InShot, a lot of times you can copy and paste the different filters or whatever you use during it, and you can copy and paste it, so that makes it easy. Sometimes that's hard though, because even in sometimes when I'm filming the same thing, colors change, and so I need to edit things a little bit differently. So you just have to kind of look at each frame and make sure they match up as best as they can.
What do you think about Viva video editing app?
I've never used it, but maybe I should try and see how it is. But like I said, I think InShot is the closest I've seen so far to something that is what I use on the computer.
All right, last 2 questions. How do you gain followers on TikTok? I feel like it's different than Instagram.
You know, I'm still growing and it's fun. I love it. And I think about it as more of a fun app for me than trying to grow. But at the same time, I noticed what works for me. Like I mentioned earlier, I think TikTok, 15 seconds, use video sounds that are going to be trending. Look at different there's different challenges, so participate in those. If there's a new dance challenge, try to do that. Use the specific hashtags that are associated with that. Reactional videos are really important. So something that like someone can react to, they're going to comment more and look at the video. Recipes are really popular right now. So think about what makes sense for what you're trying to have your page be.
All right, last question. This was great. Thanks, Jess. Fellow Rocklander here. Curious, curious if we can see this recording so that we can hear the rest of the questions and answers later.
Yes. If you're still here, yes, this will be recorded and you can view it later and keep reviewing it. You know, obviously I know it's easier to come back to something when you're in the middle of editing a video and say, hey, what did she say? So yeah, this will be up for you guys to check out. And thank you for all your questions and for tuning in. And I'm really happy and I hope you guys learned stuff and are staying healthy and safe.